one thing a lot of businesses don't consider is that there's really no regulation around how secure the off-the-shelf software really needs to be. Like, did you hear about the big Windows vulnerability, or not vulnerability, but the big outage that we had the other day?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was Crowdstrike. They had a massive outage that literally took down like 8 million Windows machines, and everybody that it wouldn't even boot into Windows, so they couldn't do like over-the-air updates. And every single Windows machine that had that software had to have somebody literally go with a cart and plug in a laptop to each and every single machine that was running that software. And, people paid them millions, if not billions of dollars. I'm not sure exactly how large CrowdStrike is. But the point is that there are no laws that say that the software has to run this much or that it needs to be this secure. Like, security vulnerabilities and exploits happen all the time, and there's really nothing that we can do to stop them. And what I found really interesting from my position and my technical knowledge on how web applications work is that, generally speaking, web applications are a lot less secure than you think they are. And I've had a number of situations where I'm evaluating different off-the-shelf software myself or for a client, and I find a vulnerability just like out in the open. I'm really not even looking for it, but I'm like, hey, that's a little bit weird. Why does the URL end in a number? Like, what happens if I increase that by one number? Boom, I'm seeing somebody else's data. I saw that with COVID tests during COVID.
Oh, wow.
I went to download one and I saw the URL had just an integer. I bumped it up one and it gave me somebody else's a COVID test. Yeah, that one could be there. I know there is some legislation, like to backtrack a little bit. If you're in a country that has the GDPR, or if it's HIPAA data, then there is some level of security that you need to have, but it's still not good. And so, I mean, that should be a concern as well when trying to make the decision. When I'm looking at different off-the-shelf solutions, I just understand that by putting my data into this solution, I'm giving the people who own it that data. There's nothing that says that they can't look at it. And I'm also accepting the fact that it could be leaked at some point. So if you're not okay with that, if that's not something that your business can handle, it's not a risk that you could take, then it really makes sense to build something yourself, because we can lock it up like Fort Knox. We can make it incredibly secure and reduce every risk of somebody exploiting your data. Yeah, that's a thing to consider. And then there are different regulations for software. There's like one called a SOC 2, and you can see, do they have these cybersecurity compliance frameworks in place? If they do, that's a good indicator that this off-the-shelf solution's good. Generally, what we do when we're trying to make very secure software is we follow one of these cybersecurity frameworks, like SOC 2, or like there's another, it's ISO 27001 is what I think it's called. And these frameworks are put in place to help auditors understand how secure a business is from a cybersecurity compliance perspective. So it's just a kind of a good little pointer. Like, hey, if you're going to use off-the-shelf software, find one that has that done. Like I said, even with these systems in place, they're very generic. When you build custom software, you can get very specific about how the data is handled. Again, circling back to do you want your risk something that you have control over or something you don't have control over? What is the cost benefit analysis on that for your business? That's something that you need to decide. So yeah, that's a kind of a long-winded way to say a lot of off-the-shelf software is very insecure. And if you're going to put your data in there, be really careful and to look for good certified software solutions. And if you can't handle that risk, don't do it.
Yeah. And that applies to what you were talking about earlier too, with like low code builders, where people are using these drag and drop builders. I know you've told me in the past some of the things that you've seen with with people's NAC applications where, you know, their API key was totally visible, for example. So you could, you know, just use their key and do whatever you want basically with their system.
Yeah, but that's generally the consequence of somebody that really doesn't know what they're doing something they shouldn't. You know, I don't think that there's a lot of security vulnerabilities from NAC. I think that was a situation of somebody copying some custom code that they saw in some forums and pasting it into their app. You're right. You can make mistakes, and these, you know, drag and drop tools, it's hard to know how secure they really are. So it's good to ask about that at least, you know.
And that's exactly what I mean is if you're not an experienced engineer and you're going to take on a project to develop an application, even if you're using a drag and drop builder and you're using very little code, you're opening yourself up to some risks because you're going to be building something and you might not know if you're not following best practice, right? So that's where it's really important to have, you know, somebody who's an expert tell you at least, you know, what you should be doing, if not handling the project for you.